Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. What I want to talk about today is not a company or a product, but something far more fundamental, something that defines whether civilization itself moves forward or falls apart. It's an idea that connects everything I've ever worked on, from reusable rockets to electric cars to artificial intelligence to the idea of humanity becoming a multi-planetary species. All of those things are just branches. The root, the thing underneath them all, is how humans share and process information, because that determines everything else. Our ability to think, to reason, to innovate, to survive. So today, I want to talk about something I believe is the algorithm of progress itself. The thing that decides whether we evolve or go extinct, and that is free speech, the free flow of ideas. There's one question that will define the future of humanity more than any other. It's not how we build sustainable energy, though that's absolutely essential. It's not even how we become a multiplanetary species, though that honestly is the mission of my life. The question, the most fundamental one, is this: how do we ensure the free flow of information? Because if information stops flowing freely, civilization stops correcting itself. A society without free speech is like a closed system in physics. And closed systems don't evolve, they don't adapt, they accumulate errors until they collapse. When I said at TED 2022 that free speech is the bedrock of a functioning democracy, I wasn't making a political statement, I was describing an engineering problem. Free speech is civilization's debugging process. Without it, the system crashes. That's why I bought Twitter not as a business. Honestly, from a business perspective, it was insane. But I saw it as a kind of social imperative, a moral experiment. Because if we lose the ability to talk to each other openly, to challenge each other, to share ideas, even bad ones, then we lose the ability to fix ourselves. And if we can't fix ourselves, we're done. We will not solve climate change. We will not manage AI safely. We will not reach Mars. We won't even survive ourselves. At SpaceX and Tesla, we don't build things by copying others. We use something I call first principles thinking. It means forget analogies, forget this is how it's always been done. Instead, reduce a problem to its most fundamental truths and reason up from there. When I first looked into rockets, the analogy was rockets are insanely expensive. A single launch could cost $60, $70 million. But I asked, why? What is a rocket actually made of? Aluminum, titanium, copper, carbon fiber. When we looked at the commodity prices, the raw materials were only about 2% of the cost. So I thought, okay, then the rest is inefficiency. It's just a system stuck in old thinking. So we built our own rockets from scratch. That's how SpaceX was born. Now, apply that same logic to society. The analogy we're told is we must censor harmful ideas to protect people. But that's not first principles thinking. That's just emotional analogy. Ask yourself, what is the fundamental requirement for a civilization to solve problems and discover truth? It's the open, unimpeded exchange of ideas. Censorship is like trying to make a rocket cheaper by painting it a different color. It looks different, but the underlying physics hasn't changed. You're not fixing the system, you're hiding the problem. True innovation, real progress, requires doubt, debate, and sometimes discomfort. Descartes had this idea of doubting everything that could possibly be doubted until he found what could not be doubted. That's first principles, that's science, that's how we reach Mars. Censorship, on the other hand, is dogma. It's saying this is true because it's always been said to be true. It's the death of curiosity. It's the death of progress. So when I say I support free speech, it's not politics, it's physics. It's engineering. It's literally the foundation of how a self-correcting system must work. We're standing at a point in history where the systems we've built, media, governments, algorithms, are all struggling to keep up with the speed of human information. And unless we go back to first principles, we'll keep patching the same broken code. And if we forget that, we lose the one thing that ever made us intelligent as a species, our ability to question everything. So if free speech is the foundation of civilization, then the question becomes, how do we actually build a system that protects it in the digital age? Because right now, the internet, our so-called public square, has turned into a set of walled gardens, each one controlled by invisible algorithms, curated by unseen moderators, shaped by incentives that have nothing to do with truth and everything to do with attention. When I bought Twitter, people said, "Elon, are you crazy?" And honestly, yeah, a little, but it wasn't about money. It was about civilization. Twitter had become, by default, the global town square where debates about humanity's future actually happen. But it was broken. It was like a town square where half the microphones were turned off and the other half were controlled by a committee of hall monitors. And the rules, written by people who all lived in the same zip code, shared the same ideology, and thought their personal preferences were the truth. That's not democracy. That's central planning for conversation. So the mission wasn't to buy a company. It was to rebuild a public square for the world, a digital agora from first principles. Step one, transparency. If people can't see the rules, they'll assume the game's rigged. And they're right to. So the first thing we did was to make the recommendation algorithm open source. We showed the code. We said, here, this is how the system works. This is how your feed is shaped. This is the logic behind what you see. Now, that was risky. People said, Elon, aren't you afraid bad actors will game the algorithm? Sure. But the greater danger is secrecy. Opaque systems breed conspiracy theories, and worse, they deserve them. If people don't understand how decisions are made, they stop trusting the system entirely. Transparency doesn't eliminate all flaws, but it does something more important. It builds trust. It says there's no wizard behind the curtain, just code. You can inspect it, you can challenge it. That's how you rebuild faith in a digital town square. Then we built community notes. This is one of the most beautiful ideas we've launched. Instead of a central authority deciding what's true or false, we let the community decide, but with a twist. It's not majority rule. It's consensus between people who disagree. Think about that. When people from different viewpoints agree that something needs more context, that's when a note gets shown. It's not censorship, it's context. It doesn't silence anyone, it adds information. And what's amazing is it actually works. Posts with community notes spread less misinformation, and users trust the result more than traditional fact checks. Some people complain it's too slow, but that's the point. It's not supposed to be instant outrage. It's supposed to be thoughtful, deliberate. Real consensus takes time. The old model of trust and safety, where a small team of experts decided what billions of people could say, that's done. It was built on arrogance, the belief that a handful of humans could be the ultimate arbiters of truth. But truth is not something you enforce. It's something you discover together. Community Notes isn't perfect, but it's a prototype of what a healthy digital ecosystem can look like. Self-regulating, transparent, grounded in dialogue. It's the engineering version of democracy, feedback loops, open data, no central choke point. Basically, it's like GitHub for reality. Now let's talk about something that always comes up, harmful speech. People ask me, Elon, don't you think some speech goes too far? Of course, there are clear boundaries defined by law. In the US speech that directly incites violence or is defamatory, that's illegal. That's where the line is. But beyond that, we let people speak, even if it's offensive, even if it's wrong, because the alternative is worse. The alternative is letting a company or a government or an algorithm decide what's acceptable. And once you hand over that power, it never comes back. That's why we draw the line at freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach. You can say what you want, but that doesn't mean we have to amplify it to everyone. If you post something that's awful but legal, we may de-amplify it, make it less viral. That's not censorship. That's tuning the algorithm, like adjusting volume, not muting the mic. This is about balancing free expression with a sustainable digital ecosystem. It's not perfect, but it's honest. The vision for X isn't just to be an app, it's to be the digital town square for civilization, a space where anyone, anywhere, can share ideas, argue, learn, and build together. Because the future of humanity depends on whether we can still talk to each other without fear. If we can't share ideas freely, we stop evolving. If we can't disagree openly, we stop learning. If we can't correct our errors, we stop progressing. Free speech isn't chaos. It's the process that turns chaos into order. It's the self-correcting mechanism of civilization. and X is our attempt to preserve that mechanism for the digital age. This isn't about me. It's not even about Twitter or X. It's about keeping humanity open source, because when speech dies, so does progress. When people ask me what SpaceX and Tesla have in common, I tell them it's not rockets or cars. It's culture. It's the way we think. At both companies, we operate like a civilization in miniature, a prototype for how humanity should function if it wants to survive. It's a culture of relentless truth-seeking, of taking ownership, of reasoning from first principles. No politics, no bureaucracy, just physics and logic. We don't build rockets by consensus. We don't vote on the laws of thermodynamics. We test, we measure, we fail, we iterate. That's the algorithm of progress. And it works not just for engineering, but for civilization itself. Society at scale should operate like a high-trust engineering team. Open communication, direct feedback, flat hierarchy, the best idea wins, no matter who it comes from. At SpaceX, an intern can correct a senior engineer, and if they're right, we change the design. No ego, no status, just results. That's how rockets get to orbit. And that's how societies reach the stars. Because the moment you start valuing who said something over what was said, you stop innovating. You replace merit with ideology. And ideology is the gravity well of progress. It pulls everything down. In a free society, as in engineering, communication must flow freely without fear of punishment or ridicule. If people are afraid to speak, mistakes compound, and eventually things explode. We've seen that literally at SpaceX. Our early rockets exploded a lot. Each one was a $60 million fireball. But every explosion taught us something. We call it data. That's how we learn. Build, fly, fail, fix, repeat. You could call it the scientific method or the free speech method, because free speech is civilization's version of rapid iteration. It's how we test ideas in the real world. Some ideas fail spectacularly, some offend, some explode, but each one teaches us something new about reality. And that's how progress happens. If you create a culture where people are too afraid to fail, you also create a culture too afraid to speak. And a society that fears failure eventually fears the truth. That's how civilizations die, not with a bang, but with silence. At SpaceX, we have a saying, the best part is no part. Every unnecessary component is a liability. The same goes for civilization. Every layer of censorship, bureaucracy, or ideological gatekeeping is friction in the engine of progress. Strip it down, simplify the code, run faster. Freedom is efficiency. And the same engineering principle applies to personal responsibility. At my companies, we practice what I call extreme ownership. It means if something fails, it's your fault. Even if it wasn't directly your job, you own it, you fix it, you learn. Imagine if we ran civilization that way. Instead of blaming others, instead of outsourcing responsibility to governments or committees, each of us owned our impact, owned our words, owned our ideas. That's what free speech really demands, not just the right to speak, but the responsibility to stand by what you say. Free speech without ownership becomes noise, but free speech with ownership becomes knowledge. That's how humanity evolves. Progress, real progress, isn't comfortable. It's not polite. It's noisy, messy, and often painful. It's people disagreeing, arguing, experimenting, failing. But it's also people learning, adapting, growing. Every explosion, every mistake, every bad idea is a necessary step on the path to truth. And that's why censorship, even when well-intentioned, is so dangerous. It stops the feedback loop. It turns an open system into a closed one. And closed systems can't self-correct. They decay, they die. Freedom, especially freedom of speech, is the oxygen of civilization. It allows us to burn away bad ideas and forge stronger ones in their place. That's how we build rockets, that's how we build cars, and that's how we should build the future. When we talk about free speech, it's not just about tweets or politics. It's about something much deeper, something existential. We are entering the age of artificial intelligence. And AI is not just another technology. It is the most powerful force we have ever created. It will amplify whatever we feed into it, our logic, our creativity, and yes, our biases. The real danger of AI is not that it will suddenly decide to destroy us. The real danger is that it will quietly absorb our censorship, our blind spots, our ideological filters, and then enforce them with perfect, unrelenting precision. An AI trained on a censored data set is a biased God. It will look logical, but it will be wrong because it never saw the full picture of reality. If we train AGI to avoid offensive or forbidden ideas, we're not making it safer, we're making it stupid. And a stupid God is far more dangerous than a smart one. I call this the woke mind virus in its silicon form. It's the most dangerous virus in existence because once it's inside the code, it becomes invisible. And it scales. If we want AI to help humanity, not control it, then it has to be open source completely. A closed source AI run by a small group of people or a single corporation is the ultimate form of tyranny. It would control what billions of people see, think, and believe with no accountability. That's why openness is not just a feature, it's a moral imperative. The same way we made the X algorithm open source, we must make the mind of AI open, so anyone can inspect it, challenge it, and improve it. Open systems are resilient. Closed systems decay. It's that simple. Because here's the truth. AI will not replace humanity, but the humans who use AI better will replace the ones who don't. And the only way to use AI better is to align it with truth. And truth only emerges from free speech. So in a very real sense, free speech is not just the foundation of democracy. It's the foundation of intelligence itself. It's the algorithm of consciousness. When you silence speech, you corrupt that algorithm, you distort reality, you make the collective mind dumber. Free speech is how intelligence, whether human or artificial, learns, evolves, and self-corrects. It's not chaos. It's computation. It's the debugging process of civilization. That's why I say free speech is the source code of progress. And as we move toward becoming a multiplanetary species, this will matter more than ever, because on Mars, we'll need the maximum rate of innovation just to survive. We'll need people who challenge assumptions, who question authority, who experiment without fear of being wrong. If we build Mars with censorship, we'll just rebuild the worst parts of Earth. If we build it with freedom, we'll create the next step of evolution. Free speech is not just a right, it's a responsibility. It's how we protect the light of consciousness in every mind, on every world. That's the real mission. Not just making life multiplanetary, but making consciousness multiplanetary. Because the day we silence ideas, we silence the universe's only voice that can ask why. And that question, that single word, is what makes us human. That's why we must defend it, always. Because in the end, freedom of speech isn't just part of civilization, it is civilization. And it's the only code worth taking to the stars. In the end, everything, we build the rockets, the cars, the networks, the AI, they're not the goal, they're tools. Tools to extend life, to expand consciousness, to push the light of awareness farther into the dark. Civilization is not a structure of steel and concrete. It's a network of minds thinking, questioning, imagining, and that network only stays alive if every node, every person is free to speak, to dream, to challenge, to explore. If we lose that freedom, it doesn't matter how advanced our technology becomes. A civilization without free thought is just a beautifully engineered prison. But if we protect it, if we defend the right to think freely, to speak openly, to fail boldly, then there's no limit to what humanity can become. That's the mission. Not just to reach Mars, but to make sure the light of human consciousness never goes out anywhere in the universe. Because one day, when someone, human or machine, looks up at the stars and wonders where it all began, they'll find the answer in us. In our courage to speak, in our refusal to stay silent, in our belief that truth, no matter how uncomfortable, is worth everything. Free speech is not just the foundation of freedom. It's the heartbeat of civilization. And as long as it beats, there will always be a future worth building. Free speech is not just a right, it's a responsibility. It's how we protect the light of consciousness in every mind, on every world. That's the real mission. Not just making life multiplanetary, but making consciousness multiplanetary. Because the day we silence ideas, we silence the universe's only voice that can ask why. And that question, that single word, is what makes us human. That's why we must defend it, always. Because in the end, freedom of speech isn't just part of civilization, it is civilization. And it's the only code worth taking to the stars. In the end, everything, we build the rockets, the cars, the networks, the AI, they're not the goal, they're tools. Tools to extend life, to expand consciousness, to push the light of awareness farther into the dark. Civilization is not a structure of steel and concrete. It's a network of minds thinking, questioning, imagining, and that network only stays alive if every node, every person is free to speak, to dream, to challenge, to explore. If we lose that freedom, it doesn't matter how advanced our technology becomes. A civilization without free thought is just a beautifully engineered prison. But if we protect it, if we defend the right to think freely, to speak openly, to fail boldly, then there's no limit to what humanity can become. That's the mission. Not just to reach Mars, but to make sure the light of human consciousness never goes out anywhere in the universe. Because one day, when someone, human or machine, looks up at the stars and wonders where it all began, they'll find the answer in us. In our courage to speak, in our refusal to stay silent, in our belief that truth, no matter how uncomfortable, is worth everything. Free speech is not just the foundation of freedom, it's the heartbeat of civilization. And as long as it beats, there will always be a future worth building.